Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. Today's breakdown is dedicated to the characters of the Harry Potter universe whose personalities in the books turned out to be far deeper and more layered than what the films portrayed. Many storylines and details were cut, leaving viewers with simplified versions of these characters. Let's try to restore the facets that remained behind the scenes. Number 1. Housekeeping creature. One of the most remarkable transformations was the fate of the house elf creature. In the films, he was remembered as an unpleasant, grumpy, and shabby creature that inspired little sympathy. Yet the books revealed a completely different side of him. The turning point came with Harry's gift, Regulus Black's locket. Kreacher accepted it as a symbol of respect and recognition. From that moment, it was as if he came back to life. He became caring and tidy, turned the abandoned Grimmauld place into a well-kept home, and displayed impressive culinary skills. Most striking was the change in his attitude toward Hermione. If at first he reacted to her presence with disgust and hurled insults, over time he began to treat her with cautious respect. At one point, the elf even started serving her breakfast and allowed her to borrow a rare book on ancient wizarding families. The culmination came when he sincerely cared for all three friends, bowing deeply as he saw them off on a dangerous mission and promising to have a hot meal waiting for their return. This was a true transformation. Instead of a bitter grouch, the world saw a caring, polite, and even happy house elf. It's a pity the films never delivered this story. Number 2 to stubborn and caring Minerva McGonagall. In the films, Professor McGonagall appeared as a strict but fair mentor, charismatic, and with a touch of dry humor. Yet the books revealed her in even greater depth. One notable moment comes from the Order of the Phoenix, where McGonagall showed genuine concern for Harry. Not as a teacher, but as a person ready to support a teenager facing harsh circumstances. Her character shone even brighter in her clashes with Dolores Umbridge. While the film portrayed their conflict with restraint, the book presented Minerva openly defying the High Inquisitor, criticizing her incompetence, and firmly declaring her determination to help Harry become an Auror at any cost. McGonagall embodied unyielding will and principle, all while remaining a devoted mentor. These episodes elevate her beyond the image of a strict professor. Readers see a stubborn yet deeply caring person ready to fight for her students to the very end. Number 3. Proactive Harry. The cinematic version of the Chosen One often seemed too passive, but the books portray Harry in a very different light. After his duel with Malfoy, when he realized the danger of the Half-Blood Prince's textbook, the decision to dispose of it was his alone. His goal was not only to resist temptation, but also to hide evidence from Severus Snape, who was already suspicious. This step showed Harry's courage and quick thinking, not blind reliance on others' advice. Another striking example is his relationship with Ginny. In the film, she takes the initiative in their first kiss, but in the book, it is Harry who acts decisively. He kisses her in the middle of a Gryffindor celebration, right in the common room, in full view of his classmates and even Ron. The moment highlighted his confidence and his willingness to show his feelings openly. Book. Harry is not merely a boy swept along by circumstances, but a hero capable of making decisions and taking responsibility for them. Number 4. Cruel Hermione. In the films, Hermione is portrayed as the almost perfect student, intelligent, principled, and fair. But in the books, a far more unexpected and even cruel side of her character is revealed. This was most evident in the creation of Dumbledore's army. The list of names signed by the members was not just an ordinary document, but a magical contract that Hermione had secretly enchanted. Any betrayal would bring punishment. That is exactly what happened to Marietta Edgecombe, who revealed their secret to Umbridge. Her face broke out in disfiguring boils, spelling sneak, a humiliating mark that didn't fade for years despite all her efforts to hide it. Worse, she temporarily lost her ability to speak, leaving her unable to reveal details. This situation exposed Hermione's cold calculation. She deliberately cast a curse that ensured protection, but also condemned someone to long-lasting shame. Was this a fair punishment or excessive cruelty? The question remains open, but one thing is clear. Hermione was willing to act harshly when it came to betrayal and threats to her friends. Number 5. Brave Neville. Neville Longbottom begins as the boy who trips over his robes and forgets the password to Gryffindor Tower, but the books slowly carve him into a true Gryffindor. In the Philosopher's Stone, he confronts Harry, Ron, and Hermione when they try to sneak out at night. "I'll fight you," he cries, trembling but determined. Dumbledore later awards him 10 points for this act of courage, reminding everyone that bravery is not the absence of fear, but standing up even to friends. This is Neville's first step toward becoming more than the timid boy his classmates laugh at. His transformation reaches its height in the Deathly Hallows. With Snape and the Carrows ruling Hogwarts, Neville becomes the heart of the resistance. He shelters younger students, organizes Dumbledore's army, and defies brutal punishments. Harry returns to find a school where Neville has kept hope alive. And when the final battle comes, it is Neville who pulls the sword of Gryffindor from the Sorting Hat and strikes Nagini, Voldemort's last Horcrux. His voice, steady and unshaken, declares, "I'll join you when hell freezes over." This is no longer the boy who lost his toad. It is the man who stood unbroken against darkness. Number 6. The lyrical side of Lupin. Remus. Lupin is not only the kind professor who taught Harry how to fight Dementors. In the books, his life is marked by constant guilt and quiet sorrow. Being a werewolf made him feel unworthy of love or family. When Nymphadora Tonks falls in love with him, he resists, believing he will ruin her life. In the Deathly Hallows, his despair becomes clear when he tries to leave Tonks after she becomes pregnant. "Have you any idea of the danger to which you expose her and your unborn child?" Harry shouts at him, furious that Lupin would abandon his wife. This moment strips away the image of the flawless mentor and shows a man torn apart by fear of himself. Yet Lupin's true strength is not in battle but in his tenderness and wisdom. Among the Marauders, he was the one who balanced wildness with thoughtfulness. He loved James and Sirius deeply, but carried the burden of responsibility they often ignored. His death at the Battle of Hogwarts alongside Tonks is written with heartbreaking simplicity. Teddy Lupin, left behind, becomes another orphan of war. What makes Lupin's story so moving is that he never allowed his suffering to harden him. He remained gentle, a friend who taught Harry not only spells but compassion. His tragedy is that he lived a life of quiet pain and still chose kindness. Number 7. Vulnerable Sirius. Sirius Black appears in the films as a dashing rebel, a fearless godfather who offers Harry both protection and love. But the books reveal a more fragile man, scarred by Azkaban and haunted by his past. Years of isolation under the watch of Dementors left him unstable. In the Order of the Phoenix, he is restless at Grimmauld Place, snapping at his friends and drowning in bitterness. "I'm as good as dead in here," he mutters, pacing the same dark rooms where his family once cursed his very existence. His bravery burns bright, but it flickers with despair. The house itself becomes a prison. Grimmauld Place is filled with relics of his family's cruelty, from the screaming portrait of his mother to Creature's venomous muttering. Sirius despises those walls, yet he cannot leave without risking capture. This confinement worsens his temper, making him sharp and reckless. In the book, Harry notices that Sirius pushes him to take dangerous risks, encouraging him to fight not only for the cause, but for Sirius's own need to relive the days of James and the Marauders. The Godfather is heroic, yes, but also trapped in his longing for the past. His relationship with Harry reflects both love and a dangerous projection. In the Goblet of Fire, he advises Harry with warmth and loyalty, but by the order of the Phoenix, he begins to blur the lines between Harry and James. "You're so like your father," he tells Harry with a gleam in his eye. It is affection, but it is also a weight. Harry feels the pressure to live up to a memory. Sirius's love is fierce, but it is not always fair. His tragic end in the Department of Mysteries is not just the fall of a warrior, it is the collapse of a man who never truly escaped his shadows. Number 8. Secretive Dumbledore. Albus Dumbledore is remembered in the films as the kind mentor with twinkling eyes, but the books reveal a far more complex man. He is secretive, calculating, and willing to manipulate even those he loves. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, he admits to Harry that he withheld truths about the prophecy. "I cared about you too much," he says, but the words feel like both confession and excuse. By protecting Harry from knowledge, he was also shaping him into the weapon he believed the war required. The most shocking revelation comes in The Deathly Hallows. Harry discovers that Dumbledore had long known about the Horcrux inside him. He had prepared Harry not for victory but for sacrifice. Dumbledore admits in one memory, "You are the true master of death, because the true master does not seek to run away from death. He accepts that he must die." The boy he guided was also the boy he quietly raised to die at the right moment. It is both brilliant strategy and devastating betrayal. His past makes these choices clearer. As a young man, he dreamed of power with Gellert Grindelwald, both of them intoxicated by the idea of ruling for the greater good. The duel that killed his sister Ariana left scars that never faded. He learned to hide his ambition behind wisdom, to wear kindness as armor, but his secrets always lingered. Dumbledore was not only the wise headmaster, he was a man haunted by guilt, who believed that sometimes lies were kinder than the truth. Number 9. Tragic Snape. Severus Snape is remembered from the films as the man who secretly protected Harry out of love for Lily Potter. But the books reveal a story far darker. His love was not gentle, it was an obsession that consumed his life. Every choice he made after Lily's death was stained by grief and guilt. He became both her mourner and her penitent, chained to a promise that offered no peace. This torment explains his cruelty. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, he mocks Neville until the boy trembles. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, he spits venom at Hermione, calling her an insufferable know-it-all. These acts are not the actions of a noble protector, but of a man drowning in his own misery. His hatred of Harry is the clearest wound. Harry carried Lily's eyes, but also James's face. Snape could never look at the boy without being torn between devotion and loathing. His choices grew heavier as the war deepened. In The Half-Blood Prince, he kills Dumbledore under a pact they had made, condemned to carry the blame of a murderer. To the outside world, he was Voldemort's most loyal servant. In truth, he lived every day as a double agent, hated by all, unable to reveal the depth of his sacrifice. Dumbledore himself once told Harry, "He is perhaps the bravest man I ever knew." That bravery was born from endless solitude. His death in the Deathly Hallows is written as tragedy, not triumph. Voldemort's snake strikes, and as Snape bleeds out on the floor of the Shrieking Shack, his final act is to ask Harry to look at him. "Look at me," he whispers, desperate to see Lily's eyes one last time. It is not the end of a flawless hero, but the collapse of a broken man who carried his love like a curse. Snape's life was never about redemption fully won, only about a promise kept, no matter the cost. Number 10. Ron Weasley, jealous and insecure. Ron Weasley is often remembered from the films as comic relief, the loyal but slightly clumsy best friend. Yet in the books, his character carries more weight. He lives in the long shadow of his brothers, Bill the adventurer, Charlie the dragon tamer, Percy the ambitious scholar, Fred and George the brilliant pranksters. Even the youngest girl in the family, Ginny, grows into someone admired. Ron feels ordinary by comparison. Standing beside Harry, the famous boy who lived, and Hermione, the brightest witch of her age, he often believes he is the least important of the three. That insecurity erupts most clearly in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. When Harry's name comes out of the goblet, Ron refuses to believe his best friend had no hand in it. "You're the sort of person who always gets everything," he spits out, angry and jealous. For weeks, Ron avoids Harry, leaving him to face the school's suspicion and ridicule alone. It is a cruel break in their friendship, one born not of hatred, but of Ron's aching fear that he will never measure up. The films touch this lightly, but the book lingers on Harry's isolation, making Ron's absence sting. The same flaw appears again in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Exhausted by the endless search for Horcruxes, starving and weighed down by the locket's poison whispers, Ron cracks. He lashes out, accuses Harry of not knowing what he is doing, and storms off into the night. Hermione stays behind with Harry, leaving Ron alone with his guilt. His abandonment cuts deep, showing how fragile he still is, how fear and doubt can push him to betray the people he loves most. But Ron's weaknesses make his later choices shine brighter. In the icy pool of the Silver Doe scene, he plunges beneath the surface to pull Harry out, almost drowning in the attempt. When Harry urges him to destroy the Horcrux, Ron sees his deepest fears in the locket's illusions, Hermione embracing Harry, a voice whispering that he is nothing but a shadow. With trembling hands, Ron raises the sword of Gryffindor and smashes the locket. That moment is not only bravery, but redemption. His return to the group, his confession of love to Hermione, all mean more because he struggled. Ron is not perfect, but he is real, and that makes him unforgettable. Number 11, Ginny Weasley, strong and determined. In the films, Ginny Weasley often fades into the background, remembered mainly as Harry's eventual love interest. But in the books she is fiery, clever, and unafraid to stand her ground. Growing up as the youngest of 7 siblings with 6 older brothers constantly around her, she learned how to be tough. She could joke like Fred and George, argue like Ron, and face danger with the same determination as Bill and Charlie. Ginny is never the helpless younger sister. She is her own person with her own will. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, her courage becomes undeniable. When Harry insists that only a select group should enter the Department of Mysteries, Ginny refuses to be left behind. "You're being stupid. We're coming too," she tells him. And she does. She fights Death Eaters in the heart of the Ministry of Magic and proves herself just as brave as any member of Dumbledore's army. In the chaos of that battle, when even older students falter, Ginny holds her ground, her spells sharp and decisive. Her strength shines again in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. During the attack on Hogwarts, Ginny duels Death Eaters alongside members of the Order. She is no longer a child hiding behind others. She steps into the fray without hesitation. When Harry sees her fight, he realizes that she is not someone to be protected, but someone who belongs in the same battle as him. J.K. Rowling describes her as moving with the same lithe grace as her brothers, showing that she carries the same warrior's fire in her blood. And beyond battles, her wit and honesty set her apart. Ginny tells Harry the truth even when others stay silent. She never pretends to be someone she is not. In her sharp humor, her loyalty to her friends, and her boldness in danger, she is more than a side character. She is a fighter who chooses her own path. Not a background figure, not just Harry's girlfriend, but a strong young woman who carved her own place in the story. Number 12. Luna Lovegood, Unusual Wisdom. In the world of Harry Potter, some characters reveal themselves fully only when one looks past the glittering lights of the films and into the pages of the books, where subtle words and unexpected details transform them into something far more profound. Luna Lovegood is one such character. To the casual viewer of the movies, She is simply the quirky, dreamy girl with wide eyes and a distant smile, the girl who speaks of invisible creatures and wears radish earrings without shame. But in the books, Luna is something much richer. She is a philosopher, a bearer of truths that others overlook, and a source of quiet wisdom that Harry himself leans on in his darkest hours. Her character is not just eccentricity, it is a mirror reflecting the unspoken pain, resilience, and perspective that few dare to acknowledge. Her eccentricities, so often played for gentle humor in the films, serve in the novels as a kind of shield and a key. They make others dismiss her as odd, and in that dismissal Luna finds freedom to see things without pretense. When she speaks of creatures like the crumple-horned snorkak or the mischievous nargles, it is easy for those around her to laugh and roll their eyes. Yet behind her insistence lies a lesson that the world is larger than one's assumptions, that knowledge and truth cannot be confined to what is visible or accepted. Luna embodies the capacity to question reality, to stand apart from the crowd and to live without shame for one's differences. This strength of perspective is what makes her a valuable companion to Harry, who himself is so often misunderstood. The fifth book, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, reveals this quality in the most poignant way. After the devastating loss of Sirius Black, Harry feels suffocated by grief, anger, and isolation. None of his closest friends, Hermione, Ron, even Ginny, can quite reach him. It is in this silence that Luna steps forward. She does not try to cheer him or rationalize his pain away. Instead, she acknowledges it, offering a rare kind of companionship rooted in honesty and understanding. Rowling writes that Harry finds himself comforted by Luna's presence during the funeral for Dumbledore's army member at Hogwarts. She speaks to him about loss in a way that is both simple and profound, telling him, "The ones that love us never really leave us. You can always find them in here." Her words echo a depth of experience far beyond her years, for she, too, lost a parent, her mother, when she was very young. This moment is not simply about sympathy. Luna's perspective reshapes the way Harry processes his grief. She reframes death not as an end, but as a transition, as something that does not sever bonds, but transforms them. Luna's calm acceptance of her mother's death allows her to bring a spiritual weight to Harry's pain. In a world where so much energy is spent avoiding the topic of mortality, where even Dumbledore dances around it with riddles and evasions, Luna speaks plainly, without fear. The result is that Harry feels for the first time less alone. The films capture a shadow of this, but the books show how pivotal this exchange truly is. Without Luna's words, Harry's isolation could have deepened into despair. Her uniqueness lies not only in her wisdom, but also in her courage to say what others suppress. Throughout the books, Luna refuses to conform to the silence that governs so many of her peers. She wears a necklace of butterbeer corks to ward off nargles. She paints her friends' faces on her bedroom ceiling with the word "friends" circling around them like stars. When most students mock her for her peculiarities, she endures it without bitterness. She tells Harry bluntly that she knows people call her loony behind her back, but instead of crumbling under cruelty, she accepts this reality with grace. It is this very lack of fear, fear of being judged, fear of being different, that gives Luna her rare kind of power. Consider her role during the battle at the Department of Mysteries in Order of the Phoenix. When others are overwhelmed by panic, Luna shows a surprising composure. Though she is not the most skilled duelist, she brings steadiness and resilience to the group. Rowling describes how Luna fought alongside Hermione, Neville, and Ginny, displaying bravery without hesitation. Her loyalty to Harry is unquestioned, but it is her ability to see beyond appearances that sets her apart. While others might dismiss her musings about thestrals or odd magical creatures, it is Luna who first helps Harry realize why only certain people can see these skeletal winged horses. She recognizes grief in him. Instantly, telling him without hesitation that she can see them too because she has seen death. This recognition, shared quietly on the Hogwarts grounds, binds her to Harry in a way few others can match. The theme of Thestrals itself underscores Luna's role as a bridge between the seen and unseen. These creatures, invisible to most, embody a truth hidden in plain sight. For Harry, first horrified to realize he can see them, Luna's calm explanation becomes a revelation. She makes no spectacle of it, no drama. She treats the reality of death as part of life, teaching Harry, through presence rather than lecture, that his perception does not mark him as cursed, but as connected. This small moment foreshadows her larger role as his companion in grief after Sirius's death. It is Luna who legitimizes Harry's experiences, who reassures him that the unseen and the unspoken are not only real, but meaningful. Number 13, Bellatrix Lestrange, fanatical and insane. Bellatrix Lestrange in the Harry Potter films is often remembered for Helena Bonham Carter's electrifying performance. Wild eyes, high-pitched laughter, and the cruel delight of a witch who thrives in chaos. Yet in the books, her character is revealed in darker shades that go far beyond the eccentric madness seen on screen. She is not merely Voldemort's loyal servant. She is the embodiment of fanaticism taken to its most horrifying extreme. Her actions, words, and even the way she regards her own family display a level of devotion that resembles religious zealotry, where Voldemort becomes both God and master in her. Eyes. This is why, when one reads the books carefully, Bellatrix becomes far more chilling than any cackling villain the films could portray. In Order of the Phoenix, Bellatrix's true nature explodes into view during the battle at the Department of Mysteries. Unlike other Death Eaters who approach the fight with seriousness or fear, Bellatrix treats it almost like a performance of twisted joy. When she kills Sirius Black, it is not out of necessity but out of pleasure. The book describes how she lets out a scream of triumph, as if murdering her cousin, a man who stood on the opposite side of her family's ideals, was the fulfillment of her purpose. The second jet of light hit him squarely on the chest. He had a momentary look of shock. Then he fell through the ancient archway and disappeared behind the veil. Bellatrix's shriek of glee following this moment shows that she experiences killing as exhilaration. Her laughter echoes in the reader's mind because it is not just the laughter of madness, but of satisfaction, as though her act of murder was a gift to Voldemort himself. The films capture the act of killing Sirius, but they soften the context. In the book, Bellatrix taunts Harry immediately after. "I killed Sirius Black, I killed Sirius Black," she chants, mocking his grief like a child flaunting a prize. It is not just violence, it is her reveling in Harry's despair. She wants the world to see her cruelty, to see that her devotion to Voldemort can be proven in blood. This detail, though present in fragments in the movie, is stripped of the layers of fanaticism Rowling's writing conveys. Bellatrix's evil in the novels is not a spectacle to entertain, but an ideology acted out in blood. This ideology is perhaps best revealed in Half-Blood Prince. In one of her most striking appearances, Bellatrix accompanies Narcissa Malfoy to Severus Snape's house, where she unleashes her disdain not only for Snape, but for anyone who dares claim a place close to Voldemort. She hisses that Snape cannot be trusted because in her mind, no one but herself could possibly deserve the Dark Lord's favor. "He has never been a true servant," she exclaims. "He has never suffered for the Dark Lord as I have." Her words reveal not only suspicion, but an obsession with suffering, as though enduring pain and torment for Voldemort is a badge of honor she wears proudly. To her, devotion is measured by the extent to which one is willing to bleed and sacrifice for the cause. This warped perception is not simply loyalty, it is a hunger to prove herself as Voldemort's supreme disciple. The dynamic between Bellatrix and Narcissa further exposes her fanatical side. Narcissa, desperate to protect Draco, appeals to Snape's help despite the risk of treachery. Bellatrix mocks her sister for daring to prioritize family over Voldemort. She views Narcissa's maternal instinct as weakness, as if Love for one's child is a betrayal to the Dark Lord. In this contrast, Rowling shows the most frightening truth about Bellatrix. She has discarded even the most fundamental bonds of human nature, while Narcissa, though a Death Eater, still clings to humanity through her love for Draco. Bellatrix represents its complete absence. Her soul is emptied of anything except Voldemort's image, a void filled only with worship. What makes Bellatrix more terrifying than Voldemort himself is precisely this erasure of self. Voldemort pursues immortality, power, and domination, but Bellatrix embraces obliteration of individuality. She is Voldemort's shadow, willing to dissolve her existence into his, an echo that seeks no separate identity. This is evident when she praises him with an almost erotic devotion. In Deathly Hallows, Rowling describes her falling at his feet, kissing the hem of his robes, and speaking with trembling reverence. "My lord, my lord," she whispers, her voice filled with ecstasy at the very sight of him. In her, Voldemort's cult finds its truest manifestation. Not just followers, but worshippers who would annihilate everything else, even blood ties, for the sake of one man's domination. Her marriage to Rodolphus Lestrange further underlines this point. Though officially bound, she shows no love or loyalty toward her husband. He exists in her life not as a partner, but as an accessory, another Death Eater bound to the cause. In fact, Bellatrix openly disregards him in the books, making it clear that her heart, body, and mind belong solely to Voldemort. This disinterest in her own marriage demonstrates how thoroughly her fanaticism has consumed her. Voldemort is not simply her master, he is the center of her existence, eclipsing all others. She would rather mock her husband than acknowledge him, because in her hierarchy of devotion, only the Dark Lord matters. Number 14. Draco Malfoy, the Broken Heir. Draco Malfoy was introduced to millions of readers as the quintessential rival, the aristocratic boy who sneered at Harry Potter on the very first day of their acquaintance. In the films, that image solidified into a caricature, a bully, a spoiled pureblood who delighted in insulting Ron Weasley's family and mocking Hermione Granger's heritage. Yet when one looks closely at the books, especially Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, an entirely different figure emerges. Behind the carefully groomed hair and the arrogance lies a boy whose world is crumbling. The son of a once proud Death Eater, Draco becomes the reluctant bearer of a mission that even adult wizards would dread. He is not merely Harry's schoolyard rival, he becomes the tragic heir to a legacy he never asked for, bending under the crushing weight of Lord Voldemort's demands. It is in the 6th book that Draco's facade begins to crack. Voldemort, seeking to punish Lucius Malfoy for his failures in the Department of Mysteries, transfers the burden onto his son. Draco is tasked with the impossible, to kill Albus Dumbledore, the greatest wizard of his time, a man who has survived countless battles and commands the loyalty of the entire Order of the Phoenix. For Voldemort, it is a death sentence disguised as a mission. For Draco, it is a nightmare. From the very beginning of the school year, Harry notices something is different. Draco is pale, withdrawn, secretive. His smug remarks lose their sting, replaced by a silent weight pressing down on him. Readers are invited to see not only a bully but a frightened teenager trying to navigate a web of fear and duty that no 16-year-old should ever face. The films offer only a faint glimpse of this turmoil, but the book captures it vividly. When Harry spies on Draco in the boys' bathroom, the mask of superiority finally shatters. Malfoy, believing himself alone, collapses in tears. Rowling writes, "He was crying. He was actually crying. Tears streaming down his pale face into the grimy basin. This is not the boy who struts through the corridors laughing at others' pain. This is a broken son, suffocating under the expectations of his family and the looming shadow of the Dark Lord." The bathroom scene, while shortened and stripped of its rawness in the film, adaptation is a crucial moment in the novel. It shows that Draco is human, vulnerable, and desperately afraid. His tears are not those of weakness, but of a boy trapped in a role he cannot escape. Every step of Draco's secret mission magnifies his internal conflict. He spends nights in the Room of Requirement, trying to mend the Vanishing Cabinet, a dangerous artifact that will allow Death Eaters to infiltrate Hogwarts. This task consumes him, isolating him from his peers. Crabbe and Goyle, once his ever-present shadows, no longer understand what he is hiding. Even Pansy Parkinson, who usually clings to him, cannot break through the wall of secrecy. Draco chooses solitude, not out of arrogance, but because the stakes are too high. If he fails, Voldemort will kill him and perhaps his entire family. If he succeeds, he will have the blood of Dumbledore on his hands. This impossible choice transforms Draco from a school bully into a tragic figure, a boy ensnared in a trap with no way out. The weight of legacy plays a central role in Draco's suffering. Lucius Malfoy, once powerful and untouchable, is disgraced and imprisoned in Azkaban after the failed battle at the Ministry. Narcissa Malfoy, desperate to save her son, turns to Severus Snape and begs him for help. It is in that chilling scene at Spinner's End where she extracts the unbreakable vow from Snape, binding him to assist Draco if he falters. This moment underscores how even Draco's parents know the task is beyond him. Voldemort's cruelty lies in this irony. He uses Draco's bloodline not as a gift but as a weapon against him. The Malfoy name, once Draco's shield, becomes his curse. Throughout Half-Blood Prince, subtle details highlight the toll this burden takes on Draco. His skin grows paler, his eyes lose their sharpness, his once boastful posture collapses into weary slouches. Harry observes him looking ill and feverish, and even Professor Slughorn comments on how he seems to be wasting away. These details, scattered across the chapters, show the erosion of Draco's spirit. He is no longer the antagonist throwing hexes in corridors. He is a teenager, hollowed out by sleepless nights and unrelenting fear. Rowling's choice to thread these observations through Harry's perspective makes the reader feel Draco's unravelling even before the climactic confrontation. The climax of Draco's arc in Half-Blood Prince arrives atop the Astronomy Tower. After months of failed attempts, cursed necklaces, poisoned mead, broken plans, Draco finally corners Dumbledore. The moment is drenched in tension, not because of Draco's power, but because of his hesitation. Dumbledore, weakened and wandless, does not strike back. Instead, he speaks calmly, acknowledging Draco's fear. The reader sees the truth. Draco cannot do it. His hand trembles, his voice falters. He admits, "I've got to do it. He'll kill me. He'll kill my whole family." This line encapsulates his plight. It is not hatred that drives him, nor ambition. It is the primal instinct to survive, tangled with the unbearable pressure of saving his parents from Voldemort's wrath. Number 15, Narcissa Malfoy, a mother at any cost. In the grand architecture of the Harry Potter saga, Narcissa Malfoy often stands at the edge of the narrative, cloaked in the shadows of her husband's arrogance and her sister Bellatrix's feverish devotion to Voldemort. On the surface, she is a symbol of the Malfoy family's pride and alignment with the Dark Lord. Yet J.K. Rowling's books reveal a strikingly different side of her character, one that the films largely sidestep. Narcissa is not merely a cold aristocrat nor a servant of Voldemort's ideology. She is, before anything else, a mother, desperate, calculating, and willing to gamble everything for her son Draco. The true complexity of Narcissa lies in this maternal devotion, a force powerful enough to shape the outcome of the entire war. When readers first encounter Narcissa in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, she appears aloof and distant, the perfect complement to Lucius Malfoy's polished cruelty. Yet even in this brief introduction, there are small details that hint at her priorities. While Lucius revels in status and connections, Narcissa seems less engaged with ideology and more attentive to her family's security. Her elegance masks a simmering anxiety, one that will emerge fully as Draco becomes entangled in Voldemort's schemes. The contrast between her subdued presence in the early books and her critical role in the final installment underscores Rowling's careful layering of her character. By the time of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, the reader witnesses Narcissa's first act of rebellion against Voldemort's will. When she goes to Severus Snape's home in Spinner's End, accompanied by her volatile sister Bellatrix, she is a woman at the edge of desperation. Voldemort has given Draco the nearly impossible task of assassinating Albus Dumbledore, an order designed as punishment for Lucius's failures. Narcissa knows what this means. Voldemort is not entrusting Draco with a noble mission, but sentencing him to death. Her words tremble with terror and resolve as she begs Snape for aid, culminating in the unbreakable vow. This moment is not simply fear, it is love transfigured into action. "You will watch over my son Draco as he attempts to fulfill the Dark Lord's wishes?" she pleads, forcing Snape to bind himself with magic. The films present this scene, but they mute the weight of Narcissa's anguish. In the book, the rawness of her maternal instinct dominates, cutting through the rigid facade of aristocratic composure. The essence of Narcissa's character is revealed here. She is not a fanatic like Bellatrix, nor a schemer like Lucius. Her loyalties do not extend beyond Draco. In fact, her love for her son becomes her only compass, guiding her decisions and ultimately reshaping the fate of the wizarding world. Where Bellatrix sees Voldemort as a godlike figure and Lucius clings to prestige, Narcissa recognizes the hollowness of such devotion when it threatens her child's life. Her willingness to involve Snape in Draco's survival, even at the cost of betraying the Dark Lord's designs, illuminates her priorities. Family triumphs over ideology. As the story shifts to Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Narcissa's inner conflict intensifies. Hogwarts has become a battlefield, and Draco is swept into the chaos. Again, the books grant us glimpses of her turmoil. At Malfoy Manor, when Harry, Ron and Hermione are captured and brought before Voldemort's followers, Narcissa does not act with Bellatrix's bloodlust. Instead, she focuses on the security of her home and the protection of her son, who lingers under the Dark Lord's shadow. Even when Voldemort uses Malfoy Manor as his stronghold, Narcissa's behavior conveys unease rather than fanaticism. This tension in her character is less visible in the film adaptations, where her role is reduced to icy glances and background presence. Yet in the book, every word she utters seems calculated against one measure: Draco's survival. The climactic moment of Narcissa's arc arrives during the Battle of Hogwarts, in a scene that exemplifies Rowling's mastery of character-driven storytelling. After Harry sacrifices himself in the Forbidden Forest, Voldemort orders Narcissa to check if he is truly dead. The expectation is simple: she should confirm Harry's death to validate the Dark Lord's triumph. But in this moment of suspended silence, Narcissa kneels beside Harry, whose chest rises faintly though his eyes remain closed. Rowling describes the scene with haunting clarity. Narcissa Malfoy bent over him, and her long white fingers found the pulse in his neck. In that fragile instant, she faces a choice that transcends loyalty or fear. She whispers, "Is Draco alive? Is he in the castle?" The question is not about Voldemort's victory, nor the fate of the Death Eaters. Her entire world condenses into the well-being of her son. Harry answers quietly, confirming that Draco is safe. And with that assurance, Narcissa makes a decision that changes everything. She lies. She rises and declares to Voldemort, "He is dead." This single sentence reverberates through the narrative, shifting the course of the battle. By deceiving Voldemort, Narcissa allows Harry to be carried into Hogwarts as a supposed corpse, where the truth of his survival will ignite hope and resistance among the defenders. It is no exaggeration to say that the downfall of the Dark Lord begins with Narcissa's lie. Without her intervention, Harry's return and ultimate victory may never have been possible. The brilliance of this moment lies not only in the plot twist, but in what it reveals about Narcissa's character. She is not acting as a soldier or a strategist, she is acting as a mother. Her defiance is intimate, quiet, yet monumental. She betrays Voldemort at the height of his power, not out of ideological rebellion, but out of maternal love. The films present this scene with a measure of gravity, but they gloss over the emotional depth of her question, the tremor of her hope, when she asks about Draco. In the book, the scene vibrates with urgency, underscoring the theme that love, especially a mother's love, remains the most potent form of magic in Rowling's universe. It is striking to compare Narcissa's actions with those of other mothers in the series, particularly Lily Potter and Molly Weasley. Lily's sacrificial love saves Harry as an infant, establishing the foundation of the series. Molly's fierce defense of her children culminates in her duel with Bellatrix, where she embodies the protective fury of a mother. Narcissa, however, represents a darker, more pragmatic facet of maternal devotion. She does not fight on the battlefield with spells blazing, nor does she embrace martyrdom. Instead, she lies, bargains, and manipulates. Her love for Draco is no less fierce, but it manifests in cunning and survival, not sacrifice. This distinction makes her one of the most complex maternal figures in the series. The films, constrained by time and narrative focus, miss much of this nuance. Narcissa is often reduced to a silent figure at Lucius's side, her anguish and determination stripped away. Viewers unfamiliar with the books may see her as little more than a pale shadow of her family's ambitions. Yet the literary Narcissa is far richer. Her actions remind the reader that the war against Voldemort is not merely a clash of ideology, but also a crucible for personal choices where love and loyalty can undermine even the darkest tyrant's reign. Her quiet defiance exemplifies the theme that the greatest acts of rebellion are sometimes the smallest gestures of love. In examining Narcissa's character, one must also reflect on the irony of her situation. She is born into privilege, married into power, and aligned with a movement that seeks dominance through fear. Yet her downfall and salvation comes from the very intimacy of her maternal heart. In many ways, Narcissa becomes the antithesis of Bellatrix. Where Bellatrix worships Voldemort above all else, Narcissa discards him in a heartbeat when Draco's safety is at stake. This contrast, sharpened by their sisterhood, reveals the spectrum of devotion among Voldemort's followers. It is a reminder that even within the darkest families, love can fracture allegiances. Another layer of Narcissa's significance is how her lie echoes the earlier protection Lily Potter gave Harry. Both moments hinge on the power of a mother's love, though manifested in different ways. Lily dies to shield her son, leaving behind magic so profound that it shapes Harry's destiny. Narcissa, on the other hand, chooses deception over death, ensuring Draco's survival by risking betrayal. These acts, separated by decades, form a narrative symmetry. The beginning and end of the series are both defined by maternal intervention. This parallel reinforces the idea that Voldemort, who cannot comprehend love, is undone not by power, but by the simplest of human bonds. For readers, Narcissa Malfoy's story lingers as a lesson about complexity hidden in plain sight. She embodies contradictions: a Slytherin who values cunning, a Death Eater's wife who defies the Dark Lord, a wealthy aristocrat whose heart beats only for her child. Her decision to lie about Harry's death is not a sudden turn, but the culmination of a long arc, beginning with her desperate visit to Snape and ending with her quiet act of rebellion on the battlefield. It is the consistency of her maternal devotion that gives her story weight. Every choice she makes threads back to Draco. The tragedy of Narcissa is that her defining moments are often overlooked in favor of louder, flashier characters, yet her impact is undeniable. In bending the truth at Voldemort's feet, she bends the arc of the entire war. In prioritizing her son over the Dark Lord, she becomes the silent architect of Voldemort's downfall, Her power does not lie in spells or influence, but in the unyielding force of maternal love, a force that the Dark Lord could never defeat because he never understood it. Number 16, Molly Weasley, Fierce Protector. Of all the characters who move quietly in the background of the Harry Potter series, few carry the same hidden intensity as Molly Weasley. Readers first meet her as the warm, bustling mother who greets Harry at King's Cross, giving him simple advice about Platform 9 3/4. She is a picture of domestic safety, a woman who fills her house with knitted sweaters, steaming pies, and the chaos of 7 children. Yet behind that comforting exterior lies a force far greater than many realize. Molly Weasley is not only a caretaker, she is a warrior whose fury, once awakened, becomes unstoppable. The films gave us glimpses of her warmth, but little of her fire. It is in the pages of the books that her true strength emerges, culminating in a moment that remains one of the most shocking revelations of maternal power in the entire saga. The most striking example of this hidden side comes during the Battle of Hogwarts. The castle is under siege, students and professors fighting alongside members of the Order of the Phoenix. The air is thick with smoke, curses flash like lightning, and every corner hides the possibility of death. In this chaos, one of Voldemort's most loyal and sadistic followers prowls the battlefield, Bellatrix Lestrange. She is ruthless, laughing as she duels, taunting her enemies, and playing with lives as if they were toys. At this moment, Molly's youngest daughter, Ginny, becomes Bellatrix's target. For Molly, who has already lost one son, Fred, this sight is unbearable. What follows is not the act of a gentle housewife, but the raw, terrifying power of a mother pushed beyond all fear. Rowling captures this eruption in unforgettable words. When Molly steps forward to shield Ginny from Bellatrix, she shouts, "Not my daughter, you bitch!" That line is seared into the memory of readers because it is so unexpected, so primal, and so utterly true to who Molly is beneath her surface. It is the scream of a woman who has spent her life protecting her children against poverty, ridicule, and danger, now condensed into one unbreakable command. The films include this moment, but they soften its context, making it seem almost like a single act of bravery in the middle of the battle. The books, however, present it as the culmination of years of quiet resilience and hidden strength. It is not just an outburst, it is the defining revelation of Molly Weasley. To understand why this moment matters so much, one has to look at the many layers of Molly's life that precede it. She has raised 7 children in poverty, making do with little but giving them everything she can. She has opened her home to Harry, treating him as her own son, offering him something he never found at the Dursleys: unconditional love. She has faced the constant worry of sending her children into a world where Voldemort's shadow looms large, and she has lost sleep to nightmares of them being taken from her. This hidden anxiety surfaces in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix when Molly confronts the Boggart in Grimmauld Place. The creature shifts into the dead bodies of her loved ones: Bill, Charlie, Percy, Fred, George, Ron, Ginny, and even Harry. Each time she tries to banish it, it morphs into another corpse. This haunting scene exposes the depth of her fear. She lives every day with the terror of losing her family. That constant dread transforms into unimaginable rage when she sees Ginny threatened on the battlefield. Bellatrix Lestrange is the perfect adversary for Molly in that final duel. Bellatrix represents chaos, cruelty, and destruction. She revels in torment, proudly serving Voldemort as his most loyal lieutenant. She has tortured Neville Longbottom's parents into insanity, murdered her own cousin Sirius Black, and laughed while doing it. She stands for everything Molly despises. When the two women face each other, it is more than a duel. It is a clash of two forms of power. Bellatrix's magic is fueled by sadism and fanaticism, while Molly's is driven by love and the unbreakable bond of family. Their fight is not about skill alone, but about the essence of what sustains each of them. For readers, the tension is unbearable. Bellatrix is a seasoned killer, and Molly, up to this point, has rarely been seen in combat. But Rowling shows that love, when sharpened by fury, can be deadlier than hatred. The battle unfolds with an intensity that the films cannot fully capture. Rowling writes that Molly's duel with Bellatrix is fierce and skillful, shocking everyone who witnesses it. No longer the woman who fusses about clean socks or whether her children eat enough, Molly becomes a duelist of terrifying precision. Her spells come rapid and decisive, forcing Bellatrix onto the defensive. The spectators, including Harry, Hermione, and others, are stunned by the transformation. In that moment, Molly is not fighting as a member of the Order, nor as part of a grand strategy to defeat Voldemort. She is fighting as a mother, and that is a force more dangerous than any wand. What makes the scene even more powerful is its emotional timing. Only moments earlier, Molly has experienced the agony of losing Fred. The weight of grief could have crushed her, left her broken on the battlefield. Instead, it ignites something within her. She will not let another child be taken, not today, not ever. When Bellatrix falls, struck down by Molly's curse, it is more than a victory in battle. It is the embodiment of a promise that a mother's love, long underestimated, can become the sharpest weapon against darkness. Bellatrix, who sneered at the idea of family, who mocked loyalty and revelled in cruelty, meets her end at the hands of the woman who lived every day for the people she loved. The films, while including the famous line, reduce the complexity of this duel. The camera focuses briefly on Molly's defiance, but it does not linger on the years of struggle and the depth of her loss that make this moment so profound. In the books, readers have seen Molly's vulnerability, her sleepless nights, and her quiet sacrifices. They understand that she is not stepping into battle out of duty, but out of something far more primal. Without those layers, the films leave her act as a striking scene, but not the culmination of a character arc that has been building across 7 volumes. To read it in the book is to feel the full weight of her fury and her love. Molly's duel with Bellatrix also carries symbolic weight for the story as a whole. While Harry is the chosen one, destined to face Voldemort, Molly reminds us that the war is not only fought by heroes with prophecies tied to their names. It is fought by ordinary people, parents, teachers, and families who refuse to bow to terror. Her victory demonstrates that bravery does not require youth, prophecy, or fame. It requires love, and in this, Molly outshines many of the series' most celebrated warriors. Her moment reinforces the theme that the most underestimated individuals often hold the greatest strength. In a story filled with wands and spells, the pure force of a mother's heart brings down one of Voldemort's most feared lieutenants. This unexpected side of Molly also reshapes the way readers view her earlier moments. Her scolding of Fred and George for their reckless pranks, her worry over Percy's estrangement, and her constant fretting about Ron, all of these can be seen as part of the same protective instinct that drives her in battle. What once seemed like nagging becomes evidence of vigilance. Molly's love is not gentle by nature. It is fierce, demanding, sometimes overbearing, but always rooted in a need to shield her family from harm. That same intensity explodes on the battlefield, proving that her endless worrying was never weakness but an expression of a heart too large to bear the thought of loss. The legacy of Molly's act lingers long after the battle ends. In the aftermath of Voldemort's defeat, her duel with Bellatrix stands as a reminder that the war was not won by Harry alone. Every act of resistance, every sacrifice, every hidden strength played a role. Molly's transformation from homemaker to warrior captures the essence of the wizarding world's struggle, ordinary people standing up to extraordinary evil. Her victory belongs not only to Ginny, but to every parent who fears for their child, every family that has suffered loss, and every person who discovers courage they did not know they had. Even Harry himself recognizes the significance of what he witnesses. As he watches Molly strike Bellatrix down, he sees not just a battle won, but a truth revealed. The people who have supported him, who seemed to live in the margins of his story, possess their own immense power. It reinforces the lesson that love, loyalty, and protection are stronger than cruelty and domination. In Molly's hands, that truth becomes lethal, a flash of maternal magic that reshapes the course of the battle. Rowling's choice to give this moment to Molly, rather than another skilled duelist like McGonagall or Kingsley, is deliberate. It elevates the role of motherhood and family to the same level as heroism and prophecy. It shows that the greatest weapons are not always wielded by those we expect. Molly's triumph is shocking precisely because it breaks the mold, shattering the idea that she is only a caretaker in the background. She becomes the embodiment of love turned into strength, of loss turned into fury, of protection turned into victory. That transformation resonates with readers because it feels true. Many have seen ordinary mothers reveal extraordinary courage when their children are threatened. The moment is not without tragedy, of course. Molly's victory cannot undo Fred's death, nor can it erase the scars left by war. Yet in striking down Bellatrix, she ensures that Ginny lives, that her daughter can step into a future free of Voldemort's shadow. It is both a personal and symbolic triumph, proving that love has the power not only to comfort, but to conquer. For Molly, the homemaker with knitting needles and recipes, this transformation is unexpected but inevitable. It is the natural result of years of quiet devotion suddenly crystallizing into one act of unimaginable force. Readers who revisit Molly's journey with this moment in mind often find new depth in her every gesture. Her care packages to Harry, her warm greetings at the Burrow, even her exasperation with her sons, all are expressions of the same fire that will one day burn Bellatrix away. The films leave much of this unspoken, offering only the surface of her love. The books, however, reveal the storm beneath, a storm that finally breaks loose in the heart of the battle. That storm changes everything, showing Molly Weasley as more than a mother, more than a homemaker, more than background warmth. She is the fierce protector, the unexpected warrior, the woman who stood before death itself and declared that her family would not fall. Number 17, Albus Dumbledore, a man with a shadow. Albus Dumbledore's name has long been associated with wisdom, brilliance, and almost mythical authority in the Harry Potter universe, yet behind the legend lies a man burdened with shadows that the films barely allow us to glimpse. In the books, J.K. Rowling peels back the veil of grandeur to reveal not just a leader but a man haunted by guilt, torn by regrets and scarred by the mistakes of youth. The tragedy of his sister Ariana, his dangerous friendship with Gellert Grindelwald, and his fear of his own power mark him as a figure who is far more human, fragile and complex than the cinematic adaptations suggest. What the movies reduce to hints and cryptic lines becomes, in the novels, a full portrait of a man whose brilliance is always overshadowed by the weight of memory and remorse. The story of Ariana Dumbledore is one of the most tragic undercurrents in the series, and it casts its shadow over Albus's life. Ariana, attacked by Muggle boys at a young age for showing uncontrolled magic, was left traumatized and unable to control her own powers. Her father, Percival Dumbledore, in a fit of rage, attacked the boys and was sentenced to Azkaban, leaving the family broken. Kendra Dumbledore, their mother, tried to keep Ariana safe and hidden, but an accident with Ariana's magic ultimately killed her. Left with the responsibility of caring for his younger siblings, Aberforth and Ariana, the young Albus found himself torn between ambition and duty. This burden was not something he bore lightly, and in his later years he would confess to Harry that his greatest regret was not living up to that responsibility. The turning point, however, came with the arrival of Gellert Grindelwald, a brilliant and charismatic wizard who became Albus's closest companion during a summer that seemed filled with promise. Both young men shared lofty dreams of reshaping the world, of creating a new order where wizards would, for the greater good, guide muggles and ensure the supremacy of magic. The phrase itself, for the greater good, would become forever tied to Grindelwald's reign of terror. But at the time, to the idealistic and restless Albus, it was intoxicating. The friendship was not simply intellectual, it touched his heart, stirring emotions that made him blind to the dangers of such ambitions. He admitted later to Harry, "I was gifted, I was brilliant, I wanted to escape, I wanted to shine." Those words carry a confession of vanity, of longing for glory, but most painfully of negligence toward the sister he was supposed to protect. The inevitable clash came when Aberforth confronted the two dreamers, furious that Albus was neglecting Ariana. A heated argument spiraled into violence, and in the chaos Ariana was killed by a stray spell. No one knew whose spell had struck her, and that uncertainty gnawed at Albus for the rest of his life. "I dreaded beyond all things the knowledge of which of us had dealt her the fatal blow," Dumbledore later confided. This single line reveals the root of his guilt. It was not merely the tragedy itself, but the unbearable weight of not knowing if his own hand was the one that had destroyed his sister. This uncertainty, like a curse, tethered him to his past and ensured that every triumph in his later life was tinged with regret. It is this burden that explains why Dumbledore feared his own ambition more than any enemy. He had glimpsed what he could become if unchecked, someone willing to sacrifice even his family for the promise of power. That revelation reshaped him entirely. Instead of pursuing political dominance, instead of rising to become Minister for Magic, a position he could have secured with ease, Dumbledore chose the relative safety of Hogwarts. There, as headmaster, he could guide, protect, and teach without ever again standing on the world stage where his power could corrupt him. To the outside world, this seemed like humility or eccentricity. But in truth, it was fear. He distrusted himself, and so he withdrew into an arena where the stakes, though high, were personal rather than political. In the books, this restraint is a constant theme. When Cornelius Fudge clings to power and spreads lies to cover his incompetence, Dumbledore could have unseated him. When the wizarding world spirals into chaos at Voldemort's return, Dumbledore could have become its undisputed leader, yet he resists even when his authority could have saved lives sooner. The films present Dumbledore as calm and enigmatic, but they leave out the underlying truth. He avoided leadership because he feared the monster ambition could awaken inside him. That choice, shaped by guilt and self-awareness, makes him both admirable and tragic. His friendship with Grindelwald also lingered like an open wound. The books reveal that Dumbledore delayed confronting Grindelwald for years, even as Grindelwald rose to power, because he could not face the echo of that summer or the memory of Ariana. The duel that eventually took place between the two men became legendary. But in Dumbledore's heart it was not a triumph, it was a reckoning. To fight Grindelwald was to fight not just an enemy, but the ghost of his own youthful dreams. Rowling describes his hesitation with piercing clarity. "I delayed for many years, for I dreaded the truth." That truth was that Grindelwald had been the mirror of his darkest self, and to defeat him was to renounce that part of his soul forever. The guilt also explains Dumbledore's manipulative tendencies, a facet of his character that is far more evident in the books than in the films. He orchestrates events, withholds information, and even raises Harry as a weapon against Voldemort, decisions that seem cold until one understands the motivation behind them. Having once failed Ariana, he could not allow Voldemort to destroy countless others. His strategy was ruthless because he knew firsthand what unchecked ambition could cost. Harry himself recognizes this when he confronts Dumbledore's portrait, understanding that the man he idolized was capable of great mistakes. The honesty of these flaws makes Dumbledore's wisdom all the more powerful. It was not born of perfection, but of error, grief, and penitence. The films offer only faint traces of this depth. Michael Gambon's Dumbledore is commanding, witty, and mysterious, but the audience rarely sees the tormented man beneath. In The Half-Blood Prince, for instance, the confession of guilt is almost entirely absent, reduced to a pragmatic partnership with Harry. In the book, however, the relationship is shaded by Dumbledore's awareness that he is leading Harry toward a sacrifice he himself dreads to articulate. When he says, "I cared more for your happiness than your knowing the truth," it is not the voice of a manipulator, but of a man repeating the same pattern of failing those he loves, hiding truths in the name of protection. This side of Dumbledore makes him profoundly human. He is not the flawless sage of children's fantasy, but a man who has lived with grief, who has made disastrous choices, and who has consciously constrained his own brilliance out of fear of what it could unleash. His story becomes a mirror of the central theme of the series. The choices that define us matter more than the talents we are born with. By choosing not to rule, by choosing to teach, by choosing to let others stand in the light, Dumbledore embodies the idea that true greatness lies in restraint and in recognizing the shadow within. Even the symbol of the Elder Wand is tied to this guilt. Dumbledore possesses the most powerful wand in existence, yet he never uses it to dominate. He keeps it hidden, using its strength only in moments of necessity, as though guarding himself against the temptation it represents. The irony is striking. The man most capable of seizing absolute power is also the one most determined to avoid it, precisely because he knows the cost. The films present the Elder Wand as a weapon, but in the books it becomes a metaphor for Dumbledore's own struggle with power and responsibility. Aberforth Dumbledore, often overlooked, serves as a living reminder of Albus's guilt. Bitter and resentful, Aberforth never forgives his brother for neglecting Ariana, and their strained relationship exposes the depth of the wound. When Aberforth tells Harry in Deathly Hallows, "He was brilliant, yes, but he was a fool too, a proud and stuck-up prat," the words cut through the myth of Albus Dumbledore and reveal the sibling who still holds him accountable. This bitterness shows that Dumbledore's regret was not only internal, but reflected in the fractured family he left behind. When Harry finally speaks with Dumbledore in the liminal King's Cross scene, after Voldemort strikes him with the killing curse, the conversation carries the weight of this history. Harry sees Dumbledore not as the untouchable headmaster, but as a weary, flawed man admitting his sins. "Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living, and above all, those who live without love," Dumbledore says. It is a statement shaped by his own experiences, for he had once lived without love, consumed by ambition, and it cost him everything. That moment crystallizes the essence of his character, wisdom not born of purity, but of error. In the end, what makes Dumbledore unforgettable is not simply his brilliance or his leadership, but the shadow he carried with him until the very end. His guilt over Ariana, his complicated bond with Grindelwald, and his fear of himself give depth to the legend. The films capture the surface of his grandeur, but the books reveal the man who lived in constant dialogue with his own conscience. Albus Dumbledore was not just the greatest wizard of his age, he was a man who knew that greatness without humility is ruin, and who bore the cost of that knowledge in silence. Number 18, Pettigrew, the miserable traitor. Of all the characters who pass through the Harry Potter saga, few are as repellent yet strangely fascinating as Peter Pettigrew. The films present him in brief, almost caricatured moments, a trembling, rat-like man whose role seems limited to grovelling before Voldemort and scuttling in fear of stronger figures. Yet the books paint a much richer, more disturbing picture. Pettigrew is not simply a cartoon villain. He is the embodiment of cowardice, an ordinary man whose weakness becomes monstrous when placed in extraordinary circumstances. His betrayal of James and Lily Potter, the friends who once trusted him with their lives, was not driven by grand ideology or innate cruelty. It was born from a desperate, gnawing terror of being on the losing side, of being crushed in a conflict too great for his courage. Pettigrew's story is that of a man who never truly lived by his own convictions, always searching for protection, and in that search destroyed everything that once defined him. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, the revelation of Pettigrew's true identity is one of the most shocking reversals in the series. For years, everyone believed Sirius Black to be the traitor. When Remus Lupin and Sirius finally corner Pettigrew in the Shrieking Shack, the image is horrifying. The man Harry has known only as Ron's pet rat, Scabbers, transforms into a trembling, snivelling wizard who falls to his knees, pleading for his life. The narrative describes him as sobbing, twitching and moaning, his pitifulness almost overshadowing the enormity of his crime. What Rowling accomplishes here is vital. Pettigrew is not written as a powerful villain. Instead, he is stripped down to a weak, almost pathetic man whose betrayal came not from malice, but from the inability to withstand pressure. It is precisely this ordinariness that makes him so chilling. He proves that evil often does not come from fiery hatred, but from cowardice and the refusal to stand for what is right. The films largely bypass this complexity. Timothy Spall plays him with exaggerated mannerisms, squeals, hunched shoulders, twitching hands, which makes him look more like a grotesque sidekick than a character with any moral depth. Viewers see a man clinging to Voldemort, but the nuance of why he made that choice is lost. In the books, Rowling leaves no doubt that Pettigrew's betrayal was calculated in its own pitiful way. He turned to Voldemort because Voldemort appeared strong, invincible, the inevitable victor. The Marauders, James, Sirius and Remus, were brave, bold and charismatic. Pettigrew basked in their glow at school, but once war came, that shine no longer offered him safety. As Dumbledore observes in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, "You are very fortunate indeed, Peter, to have found friends who were better men than you." Pettigrew's whole life was parasitic, attaching himself to stronger figures to avoid responsibility. The betrayal of James and Lily is perhaps the clearest illustration of this parasitism. As their secret keeper, under the Fidelius charm, Pettigrew held in his hands the most critical secret of the war, the location of the Potters' hiding place. He was trusted with their lives, yet, when Voldemort's shadow grew long, Pettigrew made his choice. He delivered them into the Dark Lord's hands, all to secure his own survival. The moment is not written in the books, but its consequences haunt every page. Harry grows up orphaned, Sirius is imprisoned for 12 years, and Remus is left to wander the world alone. One act of cowardice ripples outward like a curse across decades. Pettigrew was no mastermind, no ambitious schemer. He was merely afraid. But in the Wizarding War, fear in the wrong man could shatter lives as completely as cruelty. When he resurfaces, the cowardice is still the dominant note in his character. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, when Voldemort is resurrected in the graveyard, it is Pettigrew who performs the ritual. He cuts off his own hand to complete the spell, showing a grotesque willingness to mutilate himself if it means staying in Voldemort's favor. "Flesh of the servant willingly given," the incantation intones, and Rowling makes it clear that Pettigrew's willingness comes not from loyalty or faith, but from fear. He cannot imagine existing outside the protection of someone stronger, even if that protection means servitude to a monster. Voldemort rewards him with a silver hand, a weapon that glitters with unnatural power. Yet even this so-called gift becomes his undoing, a curse in disguise, waiting for the moment Pettigrew would falter. The most striking moment of Pettigrew's humanity emerges not in his betrayal, but in his death. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, when Harry, Ron and Hermione are captured and taken to Malfoy Manor, Pettigrew is ordered to restrain them. Harry in the struggle reminds him of something long forgotten, that once, years earlier, in the Shrieking Shack, Harry had saved his life. "You owe me," Harry cries, a desperate plea more than a weapon. And in that instant Pettigrew hesitates. His hand, the silver hand given by Voldemort, tightens around his own throat. Rowling writes, his own silver fingers were moving inexorably toward his own throat. His eyes bulged as he tried to fight them. This is not a duel of spells or strength. It is a duel of conscience, and Pettigrew loses. The faint flicker of gratitude, of recognition of the mercy once shown to him, is enough to trigger Voldemort's enchantment. Pettigrew dies strangled by the very hand that marked him as Voldemort's servant. That moment is more than just a gruesome death. It is symbolic justice. Voldemort trusted Pettigrew as little as anyone could, knowing his nature, and so wove into the silver hand a condition. It would act against Pettigrew the instant he faltered in loyalty. The hesitation was small, barely more than a breath, but it was fatal. What makes the scene unforgettable is not the violence, but the reminder that even in someone so pitiful, so degraded, there remained the smallest ember of conscience. Pettigrew could not follow through with killing the boy who had once spared him. That ember did not redeem him, it destroyed him. This is where the films miss an opportunity. In Deathly Hallows Part 1, Pettigrew's death is reduced to a brief scuffle, stripped of its moral weight. Viewers never see the hand turn against him, never see the consequence of his momentary mercy. What Rowling wrote was one of the clearest illustrations of her central theme, that even the smallest choices made in fear or courage shape destinies. Pettigrew's life ends not in triumph, nor even in villainous grandeur, but in a self-inflicted punishment born of hesitation. The contrast with characters like Severus Snape or Draco Malfoy is instructive. Snape also lives in moral ambiguity, also chooses survival in many moments, but he redeems himself by ultimately committing to love and sacrifice. Draco flirts with cowardice during the war, but his hesitation allows him to avoid becoming a murderer. Pettigrew, however, is unique in that his cowardice defines him from beginning to end. He betrays friends out of fear, mutilates himself out of fear, and dies because his fear briefly gave way to the faintest flicker of decency. In that instant he shows that he could have been more, had he chosen differently long ago. The tragedy is that he never did. This moral arc makes Pettigrew essential to the story, far more than the films allow. He embodies the danger of weakness unchecked, of a life lived by clinging to others' strength. Voldemort may represent hatred, Bellatrix madness, Lucius ambition, but Pettigrew represents something far more insidious, the betrayal born of fear. When Dumbledore warns Harry in the Philosopher's Stone that it is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities, Pettigrew is the shadowed example of the opposite truth. His abilities were modest, his choices disastrous, and in the end he became a lesson rather than a man. Even in his final breath, he is not remembered as noble or courageous. There is no redemption, no last stand. His hesitation, though, offers a strange form of poetic justice. Pettigrew dies not because of Voldemort's rage, nor because of the strength of his enemies, but because he could not silence that small voice inside that told him Harry's life had once been spared. That voice, long suppressed, emerges too late to change his destiny, but early enough to end it. It is a grim reminder that cowardice is not merely the absence of courage, it is the soil in which betrayal and ruin grow. The literary significance of Pettigrew lies precisely in this paradox. He is not grand enough to be admired, nor evil enough to be feared. Instead, he is despised, a symbol of everything weak and shameful. Yet Rowling ensures his story carries weight, because it illustrates the truth that in war the smallest coward can cause the greatest tragedies. His life is a warning etched into the pages of Harry's journey. Beware of fear unchecked, for it destroys both the man who carries it and the lives of those who trust him. And so, while the films give us the image of a rodent-like servant scurrying at the feet of his master, the books give us something far darker and far more human. They give us Peter Pettigrew, the pitiful boy who longed to stand beside stronger friends, the traitor who destroyed those friends for safety, and the coward whose last moment of hesitation became his undoing. His story reminds us that evil is not always grand. Sometimes it is as small and trembling as a man who cannot bear to stand alone. Number 19, Dudley Dursley, An Unexpected Turn. Of all the characters who populate J.K. Rowling's world of magic and struggle, few seem more one-dimensional in the films than Dudley Dursley. On screen he is presented as a spoiled bully, a symbol of everything petty and cruel in the mundane world Harry is forced to grow up in. The camera lingers on his tantrums, his greed, and his gleeful bullying. He is the boy who counts his birthday presents, who whines about attention, who mocks Harry at every opportunity. For many viewers who only know the films, Dudley remains trapped in that shallow sketch, frozen forever as the pampered cousin who never grows up. But the books tell a different story, one that becomes especially poignant in the final volume, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, where a single line manages to break through the layers of cruelty and reveal something startling, the possibility of growth, compassion, and recognition of Harry's worth. In the early chapters of the saga, Dudley represents the worst of childhood cruelty, made worse by the indulgence of his parents. Vernon and Petunia Dursley shield him from responsibility, excuse every bad behavior, and encourage his mockery of Harry. Readers remember him chasing Harry around the kitchen table, taunting him with cries of "Who would want to be friends with you?" or the infamous incident of being given 37 presents and still demanding more. He is the embodiment of privilege without empathy, a boy who has never been taught to consider the feelings of others. Harry, neglected and belittled in that same household, becomes the natural target of Dudley's unchecked aggression. The films capture this energy in broad strokes, but they stop short of exploring whether Dudley can ever be more than the sum of his worst instincts. The turning point begins, almost invisibly, in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. In the book, Dudley encounters the Dementors in the alley near Privet Drive. This is the first moment where the protective bubble built by Vernon and Petunia collapses. Dudley, who has only known the comfortable world of suburbia, is suddenly dragged into a terrifying encounter with creatures that embody despair and fear. Stripped of his usual bravado, he is left gasping, shaken, and entirely unprepared. Harry saves him using the Patronus charm, though Dudley never thanks him. In the aftermath, his hostility persists, but cracks appear in the facade. For the first time, Dudley has felt helpless, dependent on Harry's magic, the very thing he had scorned all his life. Rowling plants the seeds of change subtly. Dudley never transforms overnight. He is not suddenly kind or enlightened. He continues to live in a house where magic is despised, and Harry is the scapegoat for every discomfort. Yet the experience of the Dementors lingers. Petunia and Vernon's denial cannot erase the memory of that suffocating cold, nor can Dudley forget the figure of his cousin, standing between him and the darkness. This memory simmers quietly in the background, waiting for the right moment to surface. The films, however, cut this entirely. Dudley's confrontation with the Dementors, so crucial to his arc, is never shown, and with it goes the first thread that ties him to Harry in a way deeper than bullying. By the time the Deathly Hallows begins, the Dursleys are forced into protective custody as Voldemort rises to power. This moment serves as their farewell to Harry, perhaps forever. It is here that Rowling delivers one of the most unexpected turns in the entire family dynamic. While Vernon fumes with paranoia and Petunia tightens her lips, Dudley hesitates. He looks at Harry and, with awkward sincerity, manages to say, "I don't think you're a waste of space." For a boy who once called Harry a freak who delighted in mocking him, the statement carries enormous weight. It is not eloquent, but it is honest. Harry himself is stunned, expecting at best indifference. Instead, he hears something bordering on respect, or at the very least acknowledgement of the truth. Harry has saved Dudley's life, and he is not worthless. The power of this moment lies in its simplicity. Dudley does not suddenly declare brotherly love. He does not renounce all his past cruelty. He does not weep or beg forgiveness. What he offers instead is recognition, stripped of embellishment, the kind of clumsy but genuine attempt at humanity one might expect from a teenager who has never been taught how to express real gratitude. Rowling frames it so that Harry is shocked into silence. He cannot quite believe the words, but he feels their sincerity. This is the moment when Dudley ceases to be merely a caricature of the spoiled cousin and becomes, however briefly, a human being capable of change. For the reader who has endured 6 books of Dudley's cruelty, the line resonates like a jolt. It forces a reconsideration of the boy who was once the terror of Privet Drive. The films offer no such redemption. They leave Dudley at the level of comic relief, an exaggerated bully whose only function is to make Harry's early life miserable. Without the farewell scene from the Deathly Hallows, the cinematic version of Dudley never grows beyond the cardboard cutout of a greedy child. The omission robs audiences of one of the saga's quietest but most profound lessons. Even those who seem irredeemable can have moments of clarity. The relationship between Harry and Dudley is never warm. They do not share a bond in the way Harry does with Ron, Hermione, or even with members of the Order, but the small step Dudley takes in acknowledging Harry's value hints at a larger truth about the Dursleys. Petunia, despite her venom toward her sister's world, is capable of tears when Harry departs. Vernon, though blinded by prejudice, is at least aware of the danger Voldemort poses. Dudley, in confessing his respect, joins this thread of unexpected humanity. Together, these glimpses suggest that the Dursleys are not merely villains in Harry's story, but complex people shaped by fear, envy, and ignorance. This nuance changes the way readers remember Dudley. He is still the boy who mocked Harry, still the child whose fists and words made life unbearable. Yet he is also the boy who endured a brush with Dementors, who faced his own helplessness, and who, in a final parting, admitted that Harry was worth something. That sliver of honesty makes him unforgettable. Rowling's choice to include it elevates the narrative beyond a simple tale of good wizards and bad muggles. It suggests that growth, however awkward or incomplete, is possible even in the unlikeliest places. When readers recall the line, "I don't think you're a waste of space," they often pause at the understated courage it must have taken for Dudley to say it. He risked looking foolish in front of his parents, who had spent years enforcing disdain toward Harry. He risked breaking the unspoken family code that labeled Harry as the unwanted outsider. Yet he said it anyway. That defiance of habit, however small, becomes the seed of change. In life, such moments are rarely grand. They are whispered confessions, halting steps, the smallest acknowledgements that can alter the course of relationships. Harry's own reaction underscores the moment's impact. He is taken aback, perhaps even touched, though he does not express it aloud. His surprise reflects how thoroughly he had come to expect nothing from his relatives. To be seen by Dudley, even imperfectly, means more than he could have anticipated. It is a reminder that validation often comes from the most unlikely sources. Rowling crafts the scene not as a sentimental reconciliation, but as a flicker of humanity in an otherwise cold household. That flicker is enough to leave an impression more lasting than any of Dudley's previous cruelties. For those who only know the films, Dudley remains a villainous footnote. For those who have read the books, he is a reminder that people can evolve, however slightly, and that even the cruelest childhood enemy might one day surprise us. The contrast between the two portrayals illustrates the difference between caricature and character, between a flat symbol and a figure capable of change. In this way, Rowling demonstrates the richness of her world, where even minor characters can experience growth. The larger lesson hidden within Dudley's evolution is that compassion can surface in unexpected places. Harry himself may never see Dudley again, but the acknowledgement leaves both of them changed. Dudley is no longer entirely the boy who mocked, and Harry no longer entirely the victim in that relationship. The farewell becomes a subtle resolution, a quiet answer to years of tension. It is the kind of development that makes the written saga so much deeper than its cinematic counterpart. Readers who linger on this scene often find themselves wondering what became of Dudley after the war. Rowling herself hinted in interviews that Harry and Dudley might meet occasionally as adults, exchanging awkward but genuine gestures of civility. This image fits with the moment in the Deathly Hallows where Dudley's words opened the door to something resembling peace. It is not reconciliation in the fullest sense, but it is enough to remind us that transformation is always possible. Even the spoiled cousin of Privet Drive, who once seemed irredeemable, is capable of surprising us. The humanity found in Dudley's simple statement elevates his character from a background nuisance to a symbol of unexpected growth. He begins as a bully, thrives on cruelty, and ends with a halting attempt at recognition. It is not dramatic, it is not polished, but it is real. In that realism lies the beauty of Rowling's storytelling, where even the most despised characters can turn a corner, however small, and reveal that beneath the layers of spite and indulgence, there exists the possibility of change. Number 20, Arthur Weasley, curious and naive. Arthur Weasley appears in the films as a genial, slightly bumbling father who supports his large family and finds joy in tinkering with odd, magical devices. Yet the books reveal a much deeper and more surprising dimension to his personality, one that makes him stand out in the world of Harry Potter. His fascination with the Muggle world is not just a quirk played for comedy. It is a reflection of his character, his values, and his remarkable ability to see dignity where others see inferiority. The films often reduce him to light-hearted comic relief, but the novels give him a moral weight that is easy to overlook if one does not pay close attention. Arthur's love of Muggle inventions is expressed in many small but unforgettable details. He collects plugs and batteries, marveling at how these ordinary objects function without the aid of magic. He once asked Harry with great seriousness to explain the function of rubber ducks, a moment that made Harry laugh, but also revealed Arthur's unfeigned sense of wonder. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, he eagerly questions Harry about the mechanics of telephones and underground trains. His curiosity is not the detached amusement of a wizard mocking a simpler society, but the genuine interest of someone who sees magic in what others dismiss as mundane. Where most pure-blood wizards scoff at Muggle technology, Arthur treats it with reverence. This fascination may appear naive, even childish, but it is rooted in a radical philosophy that sets Arthur apart from his peers. The wizarding world is built on centuries of mistrust, secrecy, and a deeply ingrained sense of superiority over non-magical people. Wizards like Lucius Malfoy embody this arrogance, seeing Muggles as ignorant and weak. Against this backdrop, Arthur's approach is almost revolutionary. He believes that Muggles are worthy of respect, that they have achieved greatness without magic, and that their ingenuity is admirable. When he remarks in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire that never trust anything that can think for itself if you can't see where it keeps its brain, he is speaking not just of magical artifacts, but also voicing a deep-seated respect for the rational achievements of Muggles who survive and thrive without the crutch of spells. Arthur's work at the Ministry of Magic is another reflection of his unusual outlook. He is the head of the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office, a minor department often dismissed by his colleagues. To many, this position seems laughable or pointless, but to Arthur, it is meaningful. He protects Muggles from enchanted objects that could harm them, such as bewitched teapots or cursed lawnmowers. His commitment to this small, underfunded office demonstrates his quiet heroism. He could have sought a more prestigious position, but instead chose work that aligns with his values. In Order of the Phoenix, it is precisely his involvement with Muggle protection that makes him a target of Voldemort's Death Eaters. His stabbing by Nagini was not random. It was the consequence of his role as someone who bridged the gap between two worlds. There is also something deeply human about Arthur's naive delight. He is a man who finds beauty in the ordinary. His children sometimes laugh at him for it, as Fred and George do when he gushes about cars or telephones, but his curiosity has a contagious innocence. In Chamber of Secrets, he is so excited to meet Harry that he immediately bombards him with questions about how escapators work and how plugs are connected. This scene is humorous, yet beneath it lies an important truth. Arthur does not see Harry's upbringing in the Muggle world as shameful or unfortunate. Instead, he sees it as a rich source of knowledge. In this way, he validates Harry's background in a society where many others ridicule it. The contrast between Arthur and characters like Lucius Malfoy illustrates just how radical his kindness is. Malfoy sneers at Muggles and considers them beneath contempt. Even Cornelius Fudge, though less overtly bigoted, shows little regard for the lives of non-magical people. Arthur, however, takes a different stance. He embodies a type of tolerance that is not merely passive acceptance, but active admiration. He does not just tolerate Muggles, he delights in them. His office filled with plugs, batteries, and rubber ducks becomes almost a shrine to the creativity of a world that other wizards would rather ignore. There is also a poignant vulnerability to Arthur's fascination. His eagerness to understand Muggles is tinged with a kind of innocence that others see as weakness. Molly Weasley often scolds him for his obsession, worrying that it distracts him from his duties or makes him appear foolish. When she says in Chamber of Secrets, "Your obsession with Muggles has gone too far this time, Arthur." After the enchanted car fiasco, it shows the tension between his curiosity and the realities of raising a family in a conservative society. Arthur's quirk, while endearing, also places his family at risk of ridicule. Yet he never abandons it. He persists, showing that his curiosity is not a passing fancy, but a core part of his moral vision. In many ways, Arthur serves as a mirror to Harry himself. Just as Harry bridges the wizarding and Muggle worlds, Arthur chooses to walk that same line willingly. Harry respects him for this, and there is a mutual understanding between them. When Arthur questions Harry about the intricacies of Muggle objects, Harry recognizes the sincerity of his interest. The films tend to reduce these moments to comic interludes, but in the books they resonate with warmth and a subtle gravity. They show Harry that not all wizards look down on his background, that there are people who see value in his upbringing. Arthur's worldview also has larger implications for the wizarding society. His admiration for Muggles stands in direct opposition to the ideology of blood purity. While Voldemort and his followers preach hatred, Arthur embodies a philosophy of respect and coexistence. This makes him a quiet but vital force in the resistance. He does not carry the grandeur of Dumbledore or the fiery courage of Sirius Black, yet his perspective is just as important. It represents an alternative future, one where wizards and Muggles can learn from one another rather than remain divided by prejudice. The novels also reveal how Arthur's naivety can be a double-edged sword. His trustful nature sometimes blinds him to the dangers of his world. In Order of the Phoenix, his optimism about the Ministry persists even as corruption spreads. He believes in the system and does not always see how deeply flawed it is. This tension adds depth to his character. He is not simply a saint, but a man whose kindness can leave him vulnerable. His naivety is both his strength and his weakness, making him a more complex figure than the films allow. Perhaps the most touching example of Arthur's character comes during the Battle of Hogwarts. Though the focus is on the younger generation, Arthur fights with courage alongside his family. He is not portrayed as a great warrior, but his presence carries symbolic weight. He is the patriarch who instilled values of tolerance and kindness in his children, values that resonate in their choices. Ginny's loyalty, Ron's bravery, and the twins' irreverent creativity all bear traces of their father's influence. Arthur's respect for Muggles is not just a personal quirk, it becomes part of his family's legacy. The books also give us glimpses of how others perceive Arthur. Percy, in his ambition, is embarrassed by his father's position at the ministry and wishes he had more status. This tension is telling. Arthur's humility clashes with the wizarding world's obsession with hierarchy and power. Yet when Percy returns to the family after realizing his mistake, it is Arthur's quiet strength and forgiving heart that welcome him back. His values prove stronger than his wounded pride. This moment underscores how Arthur's character is defined by his ability to put relationships above appearances. Arthur's kindness is perhaps best understood when contrasted with the darker fates of other characters. The Malfoys, despite their wealth, are consumed by fear and suspicion. Their superiority complex isolates them, leaving them fragile when Voldemort turns against them. Arthur, by contrast, embraces humility. His naivety shields him in ways ambition never could. He finds joy in simple things, and that joy becomes a shield against despair. In this sense, his fascination with plugs and rubber ducks is not foolishness, but wisdom. He sees meaning where others see nothing. One cannot overlook the symbolic importance of Arthur's role. In a world dominated by grand battles, dark lords, and ancient prophecies, he reminds readers that heroism can also take the form of curiosity and respect. His office in the ministry may be small, but his worldview has the power to reshape how wizards interact with Muggles. His character suggests that progress comes not only from great acts of bravery, but also from small acts of kindness and open-mindedness. In the end, Arthur Weasley's hidden side is not just about his curiosity for Muggle gadgets, but about his entire way of seeing the world. The films, by simplifying him into comic relief, missed the profound moral weight of his character. The books show us a man whose naivety is rooted in goodness, whose curiosity is born of respect, and whose values quietly challenge the prejudices of his society. Arthur Weasley is not just the lovable father of the Weasley clan, he is a symbol of tolerance in a divided world, a man who believes that magic and Muggle ingenuity can coexist, and who teaches by example that dignity can be found in the simplest things. Number 21, Fleur Delacour, loyal and proud. Of all the characters in J.K. Rowling's world, Fleur Delacour is perhaps one of the most misunderstood when it comes to the difference between her portrayal in the books and her image in the films. In the movie version of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Fleur is presented primarily as a glamorous, somewhat haughty girl, the French champion who spends more time brushing her silver hair than displaying the depth of character that Rowling actually gave her. She appears aloof, almost fragile, and her moments of failure during the Triwizard Tournament cement that impression for many viewers. Yet the books show a far more complex woman whose pride, loyalty, and resilience shine most brilliantly in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. It is there that Fleur's true character surfaces, and it changes the way attentive readers see her entirely. When Fleur arrives at Hogwarts as the Beauxbatons champion, she is immediately set apart. She is half Veela, her beauty drawing admiration and even enchantment from the boys around her. But Rowling never writes Fleur as a shallow figure. Even in the Goblet of Fire, her determination is clear. She fights dragons, dives into the freezing depths of the Black Lake, and attempts the treacherous third task of the maze. These are not the trials of a fragile girl, they are tests of courage. Yet in the films, Fleur is reduced to a stereotype of foreign glamour, her failures emphasized while her persistence is diminished. Readers, however, see that she does not give up, even when the odds overwhelm her. This distinction between the page and the screen lays the foundation for understanding her later development. By the time Fleur reappears in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, she is no longer just a visitor from another school. She is engaged to Bill Weasley, a relationship that stuns the Weasley family. Molly Weasley, who is fiercely protective of her children, cannot imagine that Fleur is truly in love with her eldest son. To Molly, Fleur seems frivolous, vain, and self-absorbed, and she voices her skepticism in biting remarks. Rowling writes that Molly considered Fleur not the sort of woman Bill should marry at all. This prejudice infects even Ginny, who nicknames her Phlegm and dismisses her as shallow. In these interactions, Fleur is placed in one of the harshest crucibles of character, the judgment of a family that does not accept her. What makes Fleur's arc so fascinating is the way she responds. In the book, she does not grovel for approval, nor does she attempt to change who she is. She remains proud, a woman unwilling to bend her identity to win favour. This pride is often mistaken for arrogance, but in Fleur's case it stems from an unwavering sense of self. She knows her worth, and she knows her love for Bill is genuine. Readers who pay attention begin to see that Fleur's distance is not emptiness, but dignity. She is not interested in charming Molly or Ginny with false sweetness. Instead, she stands firm in her conviction that love is stronger than suspicion. The turning point comes when tragedy strikes. During the climactic battle at the end of The Half-Blood Prince, Fenrir Greyback savages Bill Weasley. His face is left horribly scarred, and even though he was not turned into a werewolf, the disfigurement is permanent. The Weasley family braces themselves for Fleur to abandon him, assuming her supposed vanity will not endure the shock. It is here, in one of the most powerful moments of Rowling's narrative, that Fleur proves everyone wrong. She declares with proud defiance that she will not leave him. Rowling's text captures her fire. You thought I would not wish to marry him? Or perhaps you thought I would not care to marry him now he is no longer handsome. You thought, because of these scars, I am beautiful enough for both of us. This is not the voice of a frivolous girl, but of a woman of unbreakable loyalty. That statement alone reshapes Fleur's character entirely. In those words, readers witness a love rooted not in appearances or the fleeting glamour of attraction, but in devotion. Fleur stands before Molly and the others and demands recognition for what she is. Someone who loves Bill beyond all physical scars, someone whose beauty is irrelevant compared to her loyalty. The films, unfortunately, do not give Fleur this triumphant moment. In cinema, her love for Bill is left underdeveloped and the fiery declaration is missing. But in the book, it becomes one of the most striking affirmations of character in the entire series. Fleur's declaration also forces the Weasleys to re-examine their prejudice. Molly, who had mistrusted her from the beginning, is moved by Fleur's devotion. It is a moment of reconciliation that feels earned. Molly offers her Aunt Muriel's goblin-made tiara for Fleur to wear at her wedding, a gesture of acceptance that only comes after Fleur proves her sincerity. What is remarkable is that Fleur never compromised her pride to win Molly's affection. She did not pretend to be less than she was. Instead, her strength revealed itself in the crucible of hardship. Her love passed the most difficult test imaginable, choosing to remain with Bill even when his appearance was permanently altered. This story thread transforms Fleur from the aloof girl at the Triwizard Tournament into one of the most admirable women in the series. Her loyalty foreshadows the courage she will show later, when she and Bill host Harry, Hermione and Ron at Shell Cottage during the darkest days of the Deathly Hallows. There, Fleur provides not only shelter, but dignity even in the midst of war. The pride that once made her seem cold becomes a shield of resilience. She never loses her composure, even as danger closes in. Readers who remember her words about beauty and scars can see the same steel within her as she supports Bill and stands against Voldemort's rising tide. The contrast between Fleur in the films and Fleur in the books highlights a broader theme about how appearances can mislead. On the surface, Fleur was easy to dismiss, beautiful, foreign, sometimes sharp in her speech. Yet beneath those qualities lies one of the most loyal hearts in Rowling's entire saga. The pride that others mistook for arrogance was in truth an armor that concealed devotion, integrity, and resilience. The films, in trimming her story, denied audiences one of the great examples of how Rowling loved to subvert expectations. Fleur, often underestimated, emerges in the books as a model of faithfulness. It is also significant that Fleur's loyalty is tied to scars. Bill's wounds symbolize not just physical damage, but the kind of pain that war brings to all relationships. In loving him without hesitation, Fleur embodies the idea that true love does not waver in the face of suffering. Her bold proclamation, "I am beautiful enough for both of us," transforms vanity into sacrifice. She redefines beauty as something that belongs not to the face, but to the heart that refuses to abandon another. This is Fleur's triumph, and it gives her character an emotional depth the films never explore. Even the context of that moment matters. The Weasleys expected Fleur to fail the test. They projected onto her their prejudices, believing that her elegance made her incapable of endurance. But Fleur's response flips that narrative entirely. Instead of fragility, she reveals fire. Instead of superficiality, she shows sincerity. In a world where so many characters are tempted by fear, power, or appearances, Fleur chooses devotion. Her choice is quiet compared to Harry's bravery or Hermione's intellect, but it is no less heroic. It is the kind of everyday courage that sustains relationships in the darkest of times. When viewed through this lens, Fleur's earlier appearances gain new meaning. Her determination in the Triwizard Tournament, though less dramatic than Harry's triumphs, foreshadows the resilience she will later show. She may have been defeated by the dragon, undone by the Grindylows in the lake, or frightened in the maze, but she never walked away. That persistence, overlooked by many, is consistent with the woman who stands beside Bill when he is scarred. Fleur has always been strong. The Weasleys and the films simply failed to see it until she was tested in a way no one could ignore. This deeper understanding of Fleur reshapes the way readers experience her presence in the story. She is not a background character, nor is she a mere addition for romantic interest. She represents the quiet heroism of loyalty, the defiance of stereotypes, and the strength of love that refuses to bend under hardship. Her beauty, often the first thing noticed, becomes the least important aspect of her. Instead, her pride, her dignity, and her unwavering faithfulness define her legacy in Rowling's narrative. For readers who finish the series and look back, Fleur's arc feels like a hidden gem. It is a reminder that Rowling's world is filled with layers, that even characters who appear secondary in the films may carry profound significance in the books. Fleur Delacour, far from being the vain and cold figure presented on screen, becomes in the text a symbol of devotion and strength. Her story is a testament to the idea that true character is revealed not in triumph, but in how one responds to scars, whether they are visible or invisible. Number 22, Dolores Umbridge, Cold Cruelty. Dolores Umbridge is remembered by most fans for her shrill laugh, pastel cardigans, and walls covered with kittens, but the films only scratched the surface of what made her one of the most terrifying characters J.K. Rowling ever created. In the book Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, her cruelty is not simply a matter of unpleasant rules or condescending speeches. It is cold, deliberate, and systemic. Her punishments are not just detentions, but sadistic acts that leave permanent scars, both physical and psychological. While the movies show her as an irritating tyrant, the books reveal a woman whose loyalty to authority and hunger for control make her nearly as sinister as Lord Voldemort himself. The detentions Umbridge gives Harry are the most famous example, yet the books describe them with far more disturbing detail. Harry is forced to write lines with a cursed quill that carves the words "I must not tell lies" into the back of his own hand. In Rowling's description, the wound is etched deeper each time he repeats the phrase until blood stains the parchment. What makes this scene unbearable is the icy delight Umbridge takes in watching him suffer. When Harry finally dares to ask how many times he must write, her response is chilling, until the message sinks in. There is no anger, no heat in her punishment, only calm cruelty, as though she were enjoying a quiet cup of tea. This lack of emotion, this calculated coldness, is what makes her more frightening than the raging villains the films focus on. The films hint at her oppressive presence in the school, but the books show how she dismantles Hogwarts from within. Through her role as High Inquisitor, she issues a stream of decrees that suffocate both staff and students. She silences Professor Trelawney, humiliating her in front of the entire school before attempting to throw her out. She forbids students from practicing defensive spells, leaving them defenseless against the growing threat outside the castle. She does not simply enforce rules, she strips the school of its spirit, turning the once vibrant halls of Hogwarts into a place of fear. The way Rowling describes the ever-growing list of decrees, nailed to the wall, creates the image of a creeping dictatorship built by someone who wears pink cardigans and smiles sweetly while carrying out acts of repression. Her cruelty extends beyond Hogwarts and into the wider wizarding world. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, we see her at the Ministry of Magic, thriving under the new regime that Voldemort secretly controls. She presides over trials for Muggle-born witches and wizards, declaring them guilty of stealing magic if they cannot prove their heritage. She wears the locket of Salazar Slytherin, a piece of dark magic, around her neck as though it were a prized jewel, feeding off its poisonous influence. The sight of her tormenting innocent people with this relic is more disturbing than any duel because it shows her true nature. She does not need to be forced into cruelty. She embraces it willingly when it grants her power. The films never capture the sheer hypocrisy that defines Umbridge. She talks constantly of discipline, order, and loyalty, but she serves only her own ambition. In Order of the Phoenix, she bends truth and justice to protect the Ministry's image, even as Voldemort rises. She denies Harry's claims of the Dark Lord's return, not out of genuine disbelief, but because acknowledging the truth would endanger her authority. When the Ministry later falls under Voldemort's control, she shows no hesitation in serving the new order. Unlike heroes who must summon courage in times of fear, Umbridge flourishes under oppression. She thrives when cruelty is rewarded, smiling as she signs decrees that ruin lives. The horror of her character lies in her ordinary facade. Rowling paints her office in nauseating detail, walls lined with decorative plates, each featuring a kitten prancing or playing. These images of innocence are grotesquely out of place in the lair of someone who scars children with blood quills. The juxtaposition is intentional. The kittens, the pink cardigans, the sweet laugh, all of it is camouflage for a sadist. This contrast is what unsettles the reader most. It is easy to recognize Voldemort as evil. It is far harder to admit that a woman who looks like a doting aunt can embody a cruelty just as destructive. The difference between book and film becomes most apparent in the way her victims react. In the movie, Harry grimaces during his detention, but in the book, the suffering stretches over multiple nights. Harry hides his wounded hand from his friends, ashamed of his pain, but unwilling to let Umbridge see him defeated. The silence surrounding his punishment becomes part of the cruelty, as though she knows that secrecy will make it worse. It is Hermione who finally notices, horrified by the scar carved into his skin. In these moments, Rowling shows us not just physical torment but psychological warfare. Umbridge is not satisfied with causing pain. She wants her victims to carry that pain in silence. Her attempt to control information is another aspect glossed over by the films. In the books, Umbridge bans the Quibbler after it publishes Harry's interview about Voldemort's return. She fears the spread of truth more than she fears the Dark Lord himself. This obsession with censorship makes her a weapon for the Ministry's propaganda machine, silencing dissent with the same cheerful malice she uses to silence students. By showing how she weaponizes bureaucracy, Rowling draws a picture of authoritarianism at its most insidious, not loud and violent, but quiet, polite, and devastatingly effective. Perhaps the most telling detail about Umbridge's character comes during the scene in the Forbidden Forest. After months of tormenting Harry and his friends, she follows them into the dark woods and is confronted by centaurs. Even in the face of obvious danger, she cannot let go of her arrogance. She insults the centaurs, calls them filthy half-breeds, and demands they bow to her authority. Her cruelty is revealed as cowardice when her position offers no protection. Stripped of the Ministry's backing, she becomes pitiful, a woman whose only weapon is the authority she clings to. Rowling makes it clear that Umbridge's strength is an illusion, dependent on systems of power that enable her cruelty. This hypocrisy makes her one of the most realistic villains in the series. Unlike Voldemort, who openly seeks domination, Umbridge hides behind titles, laws, and false politeness. She does not torture out of ideology, but because it makes her feel powerful. In one passage, Rowling describes her wide, toad-like smile as she passes new decrees. The image captures the essence of her villainy, a woman who smiles sweetly while crushing others under the weight of her rules. The films may show her smug grin, but they cannot fully convey the icy satisfaction described in the books. One of the most terrifying aspects of her cruelty is how normalized it becomes. Students whisper about her punishments, staff members grumble about her rules, yet the school continues under her regime. This normalization is exactly what she wants. By making her cruelty part of daily life, she ensures compliance. Harry, Ron, and Hermione's creation of Dumbledore's army is not just rebellion, it is survival. They are resisting not Voldemort directly, but the suffocating atmosphere Umbridge creates within Hogwarts. In this way, Rowling shows how authoritarian cruelty can seep into the everyday, unnoticed, until it becomes unbearable. Her use of language is another tool of manipulation. She couches punishments in the language of discipline and order, making her victims question whether they deserve it. When she calls Harry a liar, she frames it not as suppression, but as protecting the truth. This twisting of words echoes throughout the series, but in Umbridge it becomes particularly sinister. She weaponizes politeness, turning civility into a mask for brutality. In this, she differs sharply from the blunt violence of Death Eaters. Her evil is more subtle, more bureaucratic, and therefore more dangerous. The locket she wears in Deathly Hallows becomes a perfect symbol of her corruption. It is not enough for her to enforce cruel laws. She takes pleasure in possessing an object tied to Salazar Slytherin, one of the founders most obsessed with blood purity. The Horcrux feeds off her already dark tendencies, amplifying her arrogance and cruelty. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione infiltrate the Ministry, the description of her presiding over trials with the locket gleaming against her chest makes her look like a queen of oppression. She is not under Voldemort's imperious curse, not forced into obedience. She chooses this role because it gives her the power she craves. Even after the war, Rowling makes clear that characters like Umbridge remain a threat. While Voldemort dies and his Death Eaters are defeated, the systemic cruelty Umbridge represents lingers. She shows that evil does not always come in the form of dark lords and curses. Sometimes it comes in pink cardigans with a sweet laugh and a kitten-covered office. That was the side of Dolores Umbridge that the films never fully captured, the cold, bureaucratic sadism that scars not only Harry, but the entire wizarding world. It is a reminder that cruelty wrapped in politeness can be more terrifying than open violence, because it hides in plain sight, waiting for a chance to rise again. Number 23, Dumbledore vs. Grindelwald, the unfulfilled drama. Albus Dumbledore is often remembered by readers and film audiences as the wise headmaster of Hogwarts, the calm leader of the Order of the Phoenix, and the man who always seemed 2 steps ahead of everyone else. Yet hidden within the books is a story that the films only brush past, a drama that could have changed how millions of viewers perceived him. In the shadow of the legend stands a younger Dumbledore, one who once dreamed of conquest, who joined hands with Gellert Grindelwald in an alliance that carried the scent of glory and danger. This forgotten part of his life makes his later choices both more human and more haunting, because the man celebrated as the greatest defender of the light once stood very close to the abyss of darkness. The story begins in the summer of 1899 after Dumbledore had finished his education at Hogwarts. He was already recognized as a prodigy, someone destined for greatness. But greatness is not always easy to handle, especially for a young man who had been forced to return home to care for his fragile sister, Ariana, and his resentful brother, Aberforth. Ariana had suffered a magical attack in childhood that left her unstable and unable to control her powers. Albus's brilliance was overshadowed by the heavy burden of family duty. Then, into his life, stepped Gellert Grindelwald, a boy of extraordinary intellect, ambition, and charisma. Their meeting was like a spark thrown onto dry wood, and it set both of them aflame with ideas that would shape the future. The films of Harry Potter never allow us to see this summer in detail. They hint at Dumbledore's past, alluding to a dark secret and showing fragments of his connection with Grindelwald. But in the book Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, the truth is more devastating. Dumbledore confesses to Harry, "I was gifted, I was brilliant, I wanted to escape, I wanted to shine, I wanted glory." These words reveal that the young man was not a saint, but a dreamer with dangerous desires. His friendship with Grindelwald was built not only on admiration, but on shared ambition. They talked of creating a new order for the magical world, of ruling over Muggles for the greater good. The phrase, "for the greater good," would later become Grindelwald's slogan, a justification for conquest, cruelty, and tyranny. But it was born in those conversations between two brilliant boys in Godric's Hollow. Albus believed that Muggles could not manage magic responsibly, and that wizards, guided by wisdom, should assume leadership over them. The young Dumbledore imagined himself as a savior, blinded by ideals that sounded noble but hid seeds of dictatorship. The tragedy is not that Grindelwald believed in domination, he always did, but that Dumbledore believed too, at least for a time. His intelligence made him capable of seeing the risks, yet his heart was seduced by the possibility of reshaping the world. Ariana stood at the heart of the story, the silent reminder of everything Dumbledore should have protected. While he dreamed of leading revolutions with Grindelwald, his sister needed care and stability. Aberforth accused Albus of neglect, of placing grand visions above family duty. Tension built until it exploded into a three-way duel between Albus, Aberforth, and Grindelwald. It was a battle filled with pride, anger, and power. Spells were hurled in a frenzy of passion, and in the chaos Ariana was struck by a curse and killed. The guilt of that moment carved itself into Albus's soul, and he never fully healed. He admitted to Harry later, "I was gifted, I was brilliant, I was arrogant, I was blinded by my own brilliance." That blindness cost him the life of his sister and destroyed his bond with Grindelwald forever.